tonight. Jailed for revenge porn, the disgraced reality TV star Stephen Bear.
Do you feel no remorse at all?
Sentenced to 21 months behind bars and 10 years on the sex offenders register for sharing a sex video with his ex-girlfriend, Georgia Harrison.
I hope that this puts anyone off committing this sort of crime, and I hope for anyone else who's been victim of it, it gives them some sort of justice.
Also ahead, Sadiq Khan under fire for implying some who oppose ULEZ expansion could be linked to far-right COVID deniers.
Yeah, she was a travelling stripe, but a Morris dancer lived up the apples and pears.
Hey, go on in. What you got?
Ruby Murray.
Ruby Murray? Murray. Straight in.
And would you Adam and Eve it? The Cockney accent could be dying out. We investigate. Good evening. A complete lack of remorse for abusive behaviour, the words of the Crown Prosecution Service, as Stephen Bear was jailed for sharing a private video of him having sex with his ex-girlfriend. The disgraced reality TV star had taken the footage without her consent and profited financially from it being shared online. Today he was sentenced to 21 months behind bars and 10 years on the sex offenders register. Before sentencing at Chelmsford Crown Court, he was filmed waving to the press and offering selfies. His ex, Georgia Harrison, said she hoped today's outcome would give some justice to other victims of revenge porn. Helen Keenan reports.
Posing to film videos for his own social media.
Are you not sorry at all? Have you got anything to say to your victim?
You like a picture of selfie?
And in a desperate attempt to deflect media scrutiny, bizarrely breaking into song.
Have you got nothing to say?
Lady in red is talking to me.
Do you feel no remorse at all?
Cheek to cheek.
Stephen Bear on his way into Chelmsford Crown Court this morning, remaining unrepentant for circulating a sex tape of ex-girlfriend Georgia Harrison online. The pair met on a reality TV show. Georgia had previously starred in ITV's Love Island.
My name's Georgia.
Georgia. And Stephen Bear winning Celebrity Big Brother. He and Miss Harrison were recorded having sex on CCTV in Bear's garden in Loughton. She did not know they were being filmed and discovered he had shared it on WhatsApp and online. Despite her pleas to delete the footage, he continued to post it on a subscription site, making money from the footage. The judge said he deliberately wished to exploit the economic value of the recording and was sentenced to 21 months in jail. On sentencing, the judge at Chelmsford Crown Court said a jail term was the only appropriate punishment for Stephen Bear. He was also placed on the sex offenders register for 10 years. The judge went on to praise Georgia Harrison for speaking out after suffering extensive humiliation and embarrassment. Leaving court today, she says she hopes the decision to waive her anonymity will help other victims.
Today's sentence is a vindication of what I've been put through and sends a clear message that the police and the courts take this matter very seriously. I want to let all other victims of this crime know that I stand in solidarity with them.
Since revenge porn became illegal in 2015, only 6% of these crimes resulted in a suspect being charged or summoned to court. It's thought today's sentencing could be a watershed moment.
There's clear case law precedent now, and we hope that her actions and her bravery will both encourage more women to come forward and set the standard for what sentencing should be, because this kind of crime can destroy a woman.
During his trial, Stephen Bear arrived to court in a Rolls-Royce. Tonight, he will spend his first night behind bars. Helen Keenan, ITV News.
A couple from Eltham who went on the run with their baby have appeared in court after the remains of a newborn were found in woodland in Brighton. Constance Martin and Mark Gordon have been missing for 8 weeks. Ellie Pitt is at Crawley Magistrates Court. Ellie, what happened today?
Well, Lucrezia, Constance Martin and Mark Gordon appeared at Crawley Magistrates Court. They were both wearing grey jogging bottoms and grey sweatshirts, and Mr Gordon had a grey jumper on his head throughout the whole hearing. The pair, when they were in the dock together, reached out to each other to touch hands. They've been remanded in custody and charged with the manslaughter of a baby girl called Victoria, the court was told today. They've also been charged with concealing the birth of a child and perverting the course of justice after the remains of an infant were found on Wednesday afternoon. Miss Martin and Mark Gordon spoke only to confirm their names, their dates of birth and that they were of no fixed abode during the short hearing. They'll next appear at the Old Bailey on the 31st of March.
All right, Ellie and Crawley, thank you. Police are hunting a gang of men who have been trapping and torturing foxes in Newham. Detectives were alerted to a screaming sound which they initially believed to be from a human in the early hours of Monday at the scene. Officers witnessed the gang attempting to set a fox on fire. They're now asking people in the area to check doorbell, dashcam and CCTV footage in case they've captured any similar crimes. And a report has recommended that Neil Coyle be suspended from the House of Commons for 5 days after breaching Parliament's bullying and harassment policy. 2 separate complaints were made against the MP for Bermondsey and Old Southwark, one for drunken abuse of another MP's assistant and another for bullying a parliamentary journalist.
I cannot apologise enough for the harm and upset caused and am ashamed of my conduct, frankly. It should not have happened. No one should leave any MP's company so shocked or appalled at their inappropriate behaviour or failure to meet the standards rightly expected of this office.
Sadiq Khan is in hot water after implying that some people who oppose his ULEZ expansion plans are holding hands with far-right COVID deniers. The Mayor was hosting People's Question Time in Ealing last night, where members of the public were given the opportunity to ask him questions about the big issues facing the capital. Carolyn Sim was there.
As he took his seat, the welcome wasn't the warmest. With transport first on the agenda,
I want to ask about the ULEZ.
The Mayor began by saying the ULEZ extension aims to protect people's health by reducing toxic air. But then came this.
What I find unacceptable, though, is some of those who've got legitimate objections joining hands with some of those outside who are part of a far-right group who are... Some of those outside, let's call a spade a spade. Some of those outside are part of the far right. Some are COVID deniers. Some are vaccine deniers. And some are Tories.
And despite the angry response of his audience, minutes later, he repeated the same point again.
Some of you have got good reasons to oppose ULEZ, but you're in coalition with COVID deniers. You're in coalition. You may not like it. You may not like it. You're in coalition with the far right, and you're in coalition with vaccine deniers as well.
On the panel last night was Conservative member Peter Fortune.
So are you a far-right COVID denier?
I'm not a far-right COVID denier. And let's be clear, I don't think that many of the people there were. There were people at that meeting last night expressing their real concern about this tax in politics.
It's quite insulting to people watching.
Insulting and upsetting, I would say. It's people's question time. They've come to ask the Mayor questions and he's brushed it aside and associated them with far-right extremists. That's outrageous.
The people Sadiq was referring to had been protesting outside Ealing Town Hall last night. The Mayor said today he stands by his decision to call them out, saying some of the messages they were displaying were vile and scaremongering. But people who were inside had their own concerns.
Londoners cannot afford the ULEZ expansion at the moment. There's no money in anybody's pockets.
I just think it's a ludicrous tax on normal working people.
But the expansion is set for August the 29th this year, and the Mayor clearly showed his frustration at anyone who disagrees with it. Carolyn Sim, ITV News, Ealing.
Next tonight, imagine being evicted from your flat because you told the landlord the heating didn't work. Now imagine you paid more than £10,000 to live there. That's what happened to Lee Wright, who's been served a Section 21 eviction notice from his home in Waterloo after living without fully functioning heating or hot water throughout the coldest winter on record. Rags Martell has a story.
This flat is expensive to rent.
So this is where you live?
But for lots of money, it doesn't come with functioning central heating.
There's the radiator that has never worked.
And the amount you paid up front, how much did you pay?
It was over £10,000. Yeah, it was over £10,000. 6 months upfront rent plus the deposit. You know, we're paying sort of £1,750 a month, times that by 6.
And all that money for a place where the heating hasn't worked properly throughout the winter?
Throughout the winter, yeah. The coldest winter on record. Okay, so this is the bedroom.
Yeah.
Excuse the mess, we're moving out.
And for £10,000, there's also damp in the bedroom.
I mean, I'm ill now, I've got a cold. If you're sleeping in a room that's damp, and actually our clothes are under here, and sometimes they're damp because the floor is so damp, so cold, I just keep getting, I'm really sensitive to, you know, stuff like this, so I just keep getting colds constantly. And we've got 2 quilts on, you know, we've got 2 thick quilts on because it's so cold. It's just an example of the central heating, so I've just pressed it on.
Since moving into the flat in Waterloo, Lee Knight and his partner have kept a record of all their problems. The bathroom towel rail is the only heater that works.
This is where we get our heating.
Yeah.
From that little radiator. That provides the heating for this flat.
And there's no running hot water from the basin.
So I use a kettle to fill that. This doesn't work.
But Lee says his complaints have been answered with an eviction order. He'll now be leaving the flat, but wants others to be aware of the housing injustices.
It's the fact that agents don't have to make sure a flat's in working order before you move in, which I find amazing that's possible.
Conor O'Shea is from the housing organisation Generation Rent.
The tragic case of Ara Bishak in Rochdale has prompted the government to act in social housing, but we know for a fact that it's worse, the situation in private rented housing, in terms of damp and mould, and there's no help coming from the government in that sense at the moment.
Lee's managing agent Sterling Ackroyd told us, "We're sorry to hear of Lee and his partner's experience. We continue to work towards a fair renters' charter and decent home standard."
What would your advice to anyone thinking of renting this flat?
Renting this flat, I mean, you know, I would, you know, steer clear.
Lee's message to private tenants: check the housing conditions before committing to rent. Rex Martel, ITV News.
Still to come tonight, from Made in Chelsea to Mount Everest. Spencer Matthews will be here to talk about his expedition to find his brother who went missing on the mountain.
And today, Kim Bennett, Pearly Queen of Woolwich, will be attempting to get Jay, this wonderful Liverpudlian, to speak Cockney.
She's going to try.
First to sport and an historic gold for Great Britain.
Zero Accounting Software sponsors ITV Regional Sports Report.
Charlotte Banks and Hugh Nightingale have made history by becoming Team GB's first ever mixed team snowboard cross world champions. The pair beat Austria by just 0.88 seconds. Banks from Hemel Hempstead became Britain's first snowboard world champion when she won individual gold in 2021. Her coach said he was thrilled she'd once again proved she is the best in the world. To football, and Chelsea will hope to get out of a bad run of form tomorrow when they host Leeds United at Stamford Bridge. The Blues have won just 2 of their last 15 games and will be without experienced centre-back Thiago Silva, who picked up an injury against Tottenham last week. Manager Graham Potter says his team needs to focus.
We have full respect for all the competition, but the focus should be on us being positive, understanding the position we're in. But we've been fighting this week to prepare well, to make sure we're in a position where we can conduct ourselves well and give a performance that our supporters are happy with.
And Chelsea women take on Arsenal in an all-London League Cup final this weekend. Emma Hayes will face off with Jonas Eidevall's Gunners in the hope of claiming their 3rd successive Women's Super League title. Now, today marks 80 years since one of the worst civilian disasters of the Second World War. 173 people were killed as they rushed down the entrance of Bethnal Green tube station during an air raid alert. Defence Minister Herbert Morrison told Parliament that the tragedy was caused by panic among the crowds, despite the local council having raised safety concerns 2 years earlier. Today, survivors say they are still waiting for an apology, as Daniel Henry reports.
On the corner of Bethnal Green, a memorial stands where 173 people fell.
My mother was in the hospital. Her father and grandparents was in the mortuary somewhere. So it took my sister was the one that had to go around and find where they were in the mortuaries. She's walking around with her friend. So it took her a couple of days to find them. I was sitting in school, it might have been weeks later, and I was trembling, shaking terrible. At the time, you called it whatever. It's like doing
well, nowadays you'd call it post-traumatic stress, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that's what it is now.
It was World War II. When the air raid sirens went up, people would often head down, below ground to London's tube stations to keep themselves safe. But on March 3rd, 1943, at Bethnal Green Tube, there was a deadly crush and a cover-up.
Let's face it, we didn't know to the degree how bad it had been, because Winston Churchill put a secrecy notice on it for 50 years, so that's why it was never really talked about. It was just as if it was washed under the carpet.
Sandra lost her grandmother and her cousin in the disaster. She says an apology would go some way to recognising what families like hers have lost.
It would be good when you consider so many things today people are apologising for from governments. But of course, it was nothing to do with the government of today. But it would be nice if somebody did say, OK, you know, this wasn't really, it was preventable and it shouldn't have happened. Sorry.
This weekend, a memorial service will be held at the church. Babs will be there.
It's important to me because to me it resembles, although thank God we didn't lose anybody, but this reminds me so much of my mum and my sister.
Oh, Babs ending that report from Daniel Henry. Now, my guest tonight is best known for being part of TV show Made in Chelsea, but Spencer Matthews has been on a very personal expedition to find his brother Michael, who died after climbing Mount Everest. Here's a look.
We have an awful lot of resource on the mountain. I feel quite confident that if Mike is visible, that we will find him.
So up here, this is the south summit. This here is the balcony. And the area over here, this is known as the triangular face.
Well, he's been making a documentary, executive produced by Bear Grylls. It tells the story of Michael's disappearance in 1999 and the family's journey to recover his body more than 20 years on. And I'm pleased to say that Spencer is here to tell us more. Spencer, thanks so much for coming in to talk to us about this. This Michael was your big brother. Yeah. He was 22 when he went missing. You were only 10 at the time. It was 23 years ago. What do you remember about the time and what happened to him?
I remember the phone call. Well, I remember him going to Everest and saying goodbye, but I remember thinking, you know, not much of it. To me, he was, you know, a kind of superhero, you know, strong, fast, the best at everything. The kind of, you know, relationship that I'm sure many close brothers share. And my parents called me up into their room and said Michael had gone missing on the mountain. And I remember just not really understanding why it was such a kind of sombre topic, you know, and I was just like, well, let me know when you find him.
It's such a hard thing to process, though, as a 10-year-old.
Well, I didn't, and I think that's part of the reason that this journey was, you know, cathartic for me and important to me, because, you know, 10-year-olds don't fully understand death or grief, and at the time, you know, I carried on kind of living, and I think my parents did a great job of kind of sheltering me from it almost, but I never really processed it, and you know, he was such a special figure in my life that I guess as I grew older, it always bothered me that he didn't have some kind of legacy, you know, for his bravery.
And also the fact that, you know, when he went missing, his body was wasn't found, no sense of closure, and I suppose this is why you were compelled to go on this expedition yourself and make the documentary as well.
Yeah, I think, you know, returning him is something that the family were keen on. You know, as you say, we never had a body to mourn. So back in 1999, that simply wasn't possible. And of course, I was a kid, and in 2017, we received a picture of a body on Mount Everest that looked as though it could be Michael. And from that moment, I just thought, you know, I kind of felt compelled to look into, if it was him, of course, go and find him and bring him home, particularly, you know, for my mum and, you know, others in the family, of course, were just keen to explore that.
Yeah, so listen, you went out there. Well, I mean, we saw from the clip a little bit, we'll see a little bit more now, but I guess you got to experience, I mean, look at that, you got to experience firsthand the kind of conditions that Michael would have encountered as well. What was it like?
Base camp is an interesting place to live for 4.5 weeks. Yeah. It's a few weeks too many in my book, but it's, you know, the trek to get there was 8 days long, and it's the exact same trek that Michael took. So for me, you know, being able to take the time to follow in his footsteps for those final days was an amazing experience, and you know, the closer we got to the mountain, the more kind of meaningful it felt for me, almost.
Interesting as well, it's exec produced by Bear Grylls. I mean, he's an adventurer, we all know that. Did he have any tips and advice for you then doing this? Yeah, look, I go to Bear for advice for a few bits and bobs. I just think he's the most amazing guy. I'm very fortunate to call him a friend, but he just said, you know, you should stay at base camp, you shouldn't go any further. And just in passing, had I gone any further, I would have just got in the way of the incredible search and recovery team who are kind of superhuman. But you know, he just reminded me that I have kids now and a family, and you know, perhaps not to put my mum through that. So well, yeah. I mean, speaking of kids and family, Vogue, your wife Vogue Williams, and the kids. I mean, what was it like when you told them, like, I'm going to go and do this now, this incredible thing, very very far away and for a very long time? What was their reaction? Yeah,
I mean, the timings were, you know, unclear of how long we would be there. We knew that we may have to search more than once, but had the first search, you know, been successful, I wouldn't have been away for that long. Vogue was incredibly supportive of the project. She's incredibly family orientated, and Mike holds a special place in her heart, so she thought we were doing a great thing.
Well, listen, that is really good to hear. It's good to see you here in the warm safety of the studio here tonight, but Spencer, thank you very much for coming to talk to us. Thank you.
Thanks.
Now, it's the 3rd of the 3rd, otherwise known as National Speak Cockney Day, and down at the Museum of London Docklands, they're holding a festival to celebrate, full of talks, lessons in the lingo and visits from some of the capital's pearly kings and queens. And it's now more important than ever, with linguistic experts predicting the accent will be brown bread within the next 20 years. We sent Jay Akbar for a butcher's.
Remember the Crimbo Din Din we had with the grotty Scotch bin?
From Michael Caine in, well, anything.
Oh, it's you!
To this valiant attempt by Dick Van Dyke. Cockney sounds cryptic. Like you're speaking in secrets, but I'm told even a northerner can learn to rabbit and pork like a pearly king, and maybe by the end of the day I might even earn this golden spoon, a symbol that I'm an honorary Cockney. If you're not from these parts, like me, you might be wondering what a pearly king and queen is.
It's an extremely good-looking person who can sing badly is the basic one behind it.
And what's the truthful answer?
The truthful answer is a person who collects money for charity. It's a long historical story dating back to Victorian times, 1875.
That's when street sweeper Henry Croft created a sequined suit to draw attention to himself while fundraising. It doesn't get more Cockney than a pearly, so who better to ask? So I'm going for my golden spoon today.
Oh, right, OK.
Do you reckon I've got any chance of getting it?
Well,
not with that language.
we've got to test your Cockney rhyming slang.
Ball and chalk.
Talk.
Walk. Oh, I failed.
Luckily, the folks at the Modern Cockney Festival have laid down a rhyming slang clinic.
You've got a whole 9 or 10 words. Write down what you think these little phrases mean.
Here, it's not just about celebrating Cockney heritage, it's about giving it to the world. Even the slow ones catch on eventually.
Go on in, what you got?
Ruby Murray.
Ruby Murray? Murray. Straight in.
There are fears the dialect could die out in our lifetime, but here they like to look at it a different way.
Cockney is an evolving identity, an evolving language, so any new, what you see and hear today is the latest version. As we heard there, yeah. So if you've got an affinity with the common and the values of being resilient, defiant, resourceful and an irreverent wit, I think that makes you a proper Cockney.
Speaking of...
Many people are born with silver spoons in their mouths. But Cockneys are born with a gold spoon.
Would you Adam and Eve it? Jay Akbar, ITV News.
Not all of us born within the sound of Bow Bells, but we'll make a Cockney out of you yet, Jay. Right, it's been grey and chilly out there today, hasn't it? And I'm afraid the weekend looks pretty similar. Here's Chris Page with the full forecast.
Feels like home, whatever the weather. Valent Boilers and Heat Pumps sponsors ITV London Weekend Weather.
Hello there. Very good evening to you. High pressure has been in control of our weather through much of this week, and despite the beginning of March noting the first of meteorological spring, it's not really felt very spring-like out there. Although the birds, saying that, Rob was managed to capture this lovely photo of a blackbird earlier on this afternoon. As we go though through the rest of the weekend, it does stay fairly grey and rather cloudy. For most of us, it will be a dry weekend to come, but we still have that area of high pressure with us, although it is starting to move as we go through the end of the weekend, and that's going to bring a change. And that change is going to start to work its way in as we head towards Sunday. There goes the high towards the west, and we then start to see the winds blow their way down from the north, and that will drag in something much colder by the end of play on Sunday and to start next week. Back to the here and now though, we've still got quite a bit of cloud cover out there at the moment. I think for most of us largely dry overnight, and temperatures should hold up around 3 to 4 degrees Celsius thanks to that rather persistent cloud. By dawn tomorrow morning, I'm hopeful we'll begin to see a few brighter breaks developing across the capital, just shifting the way in from the north, pushing southwards through the afternoon. Maybe some light rain just affecting parts of Essex, I think, but elsewhere dry. 7 to 9 degrees Celsius will be a high. That's the upper 40s in Fahrenheit. And as we leave Saturday and go into Sunday, this little feature here may just bring 1 or 2 light showers to the afternoon on Sunday, but then we begin to see that colder air creeping its way in across Scotland, and it will slowly push southwards across the country. That means the temperatures slide away next week, not just by day but by night, and by Tuesday we could be talking about snow. Bye-bye.
Valent sponsors ITV London Weekend Weather.
And that is it. We are back with the latest after ITV News at 10. After the break, the ITV Evening News. But from me and the rest of the London team, bye-bye. Have a great weekend.